Deep beneath the crystal-clear waters of Vortex Spring in Florida lies one of the most terrifying mysteries in diving history. A mystery that has haunted investigators, cave diving experts, and a grieving family for over a decade. On August 18, 2010, a man named Ben McDaniel descended into the depths of an underwater cave and simply vanished without a trace. No body, no equipment, no answers. What happened in those dark, suffocating tunnels remains one of the most chilling, unsolved cases you've never heard of. This is the story of Ben McDaniel's disappearance and the horrifying theories that followed. To understand what makes this case so terrifying, you need to understand Vortex Spring. Located just north of Ponce de Leon, Florida, this isn't your typical diving spot. Sure, the surface looks peaceful enough, crystal clear fresh water, warm temperatures, perfect for beginners. But beneath that deceptive calm lies something far more sinister. 60 feet down, past the recreational diving area, sits the entrance to a massive underwater cave system. And guarding that entrance, a steel rebar gate, locked tight, with only dive shop employees holding the keys. Beyond that gate lies over 1,600 feet of mapped limestone passages, twisting and turning through absolute darkness, some so narrow that divers must remove their tanks and contort their bodies just to squeeze through. But here's what makes your blood run cold in the 1990s. Over a dozen divers died in this very cave. The state of Florida threatened to ban diving entirely unless something was done. That's why the gate exists. That's why you need special cave diving certification to enter. That's why there's a sign at the entrance, a picture of the Grim Reaper with one word in bold letters: stop. Ben McDaniel saw that sign. He read those warnings, and he went in anyway. Ben McDaniel wasn't a reckless thrill-seeker. Born on April 15, 1980, in Memphis, Tennessee, he was the oldest of 3 children in what seemed like a perfect family. His parents had built wealth and success, and Ben's future looked bright. But sometimes, life has other plans. The late 2000s shattered Ben's world piece by piece. First came the phone call every family dreads. His 22-year-old brother, his closest friend, his diving buddy, had collapsed at home. Ben was the one who found him unconscious. Ben was the one who desperately tried to revive him. Ben was the one who watched helplessly as paramedics declared his brother dead. At first, they said it was a stroke, a tragic medical emergency. But the truth was far worse. It was a drug overdose. His brother had been taking drugs he wasn't prescribed, and it killed him. While Ben was still reeling from this devastating loss, his life continued to crumble. His marriage fell apart in a bitter divorce. His construction business collapsed during the economic downturn. The debt piled up $50,000 owed to the IRS. Everything he'd worked for, gone. At 30 years old, Ben was forced to move back in with his parents, broken and defeated. His parents, seeing their son's pain, made him an offer. Take your dog. Go to our beach house in Florida. Rest. Recover. We'll support you until you get back on your feet. It seemed like the perfect solution, and for a while it was. Ben moved to the Santa Rosa beach house in April 2010, and something remarkable happened. His girlfriend noticed it. His parents saw it. Ben was becoming himself again, laughing, making plans, talking about the future. But there was something else, something that would prove to be his undoing. Ben had always loved scuba diving, but now, with unlimited time and perfect Florida springs at his doorstep, it became more than a hobby. It became an obsession, and one place, in particular, called to him like a siren song: Vortex Spring. The dive shop employees began to recognize his truck in the parking lot. Day after day, Ben would arrive with his equipment, disappearing beneath the surface for hours. But it wasn't the recreational area that fascinated him. It was something far more dangerous. Ben had become fixated on the cave, the forbidden cave behind the locked gate, the cave that had already claimed over a dozen lives. Other divers noticed him studying the entrance, taking notes, mapping the passages he had no business exploring. Because here's the terrifying truth: Ben wasn't cave certified. He had no training for the death trap he was about to enter. But Ben McDaniel had already lost everything once. Perhaps he felt he had nothing left to lose. Or perhaps the darkness of that cave offered him something he couldn't find in the world above, an escape from the pain that haunted him every waking moment. The dive shop employees suspected he'd been forcing the gate open, diving alone into those deadly passages night after night. Sometimes they'd wait by the surface, watching for his bubbles to appear during decompression, stops their only sign that he'd made it out alive. But on August 18th, 2010, those bubbles would never come. August 18th started like any other day for Ben. He returned to the beach house from visiting his parents in Tennessee, spent the afternoon at Vortex Spring completing a routine dive, then went to refill his tanks, a moment captured forever on the dive shop's security cameras. The last verifiable evidence that Ben McDaniel was alive. As the scorching 90-degree day turned to evening, Ben prepared for another dive. At 7:30 p.m., he called his mother. A normal conversation, a loving goodbye. Neither of them knew it would be their last. At dusk, Ben entered the spring once more. Two dive shop employees, returning from their own dive, encountered him in the water. They noticed his lights, his helmet, clear signs he intended to enter the cave. And in a moment that would haunt them forever, one employee made a fateful decision. Instead of turning Ben away, instead of enforcing the rules that existed to save lives, he swam down to the gate and opened it for him. Together, they descended into the large cavern at 60 feet below the surface. They passed the infamous sign, the Grim Reaper warning that had failed to stop so many before. They reached the steel rebar gate at 115 feet down, where the employee opened the lock one final time. The last person to see Ben McDaniel alive watched as he squeezed his 6'1", 210-pound frame under the narrow limestone overhang and disappeared into the absolute darkness beyond. The employee then swam back to the surface and went home for the night. Ben McDaniel was never seen again. When Ben's truck was still in the Vortex Spring parking lot Friday morning, no one thought much of it. But when it remained there into the weekend, with no sign of Ben anywhere, alarm bells finally started ringing. Police arrived to find a scene that would chill any investigator. Ben's truck contained his wallet with $1,100 in cash still inside. His cell phone, his dive logs, detailing his unauthorized explorations of the cave system. But nowhere to be found were his tanks, his wetsuit, or any of his diving equipment. At the beach house, they made an even more disturbing discovery. Ben's dog was inside, hungry and desperate, clearly unfed for at least 2 days. The timeline was becoming horrifyingly clear. Cadaver dogs were brought in, and their behavior sent chills down everyone's spine. The dogs kept leading investigators directly to the water's surface, as if they could smell death somewhere beneath those deceptively calm waters. The conclusion seemed obvious. Ben McDaniel had entered that cave and never came out. But what happened next would turn this tragic accident into one of the most baffling mysteries in diving history. Word of Ben's disappearance spread through the cave diving community like wildfire. Volunteers came from across the country, some of the world's most experienced cave divers, risking their own lives to find Ben's body. What they discovered defied all logic and reason. The initial searchers turned up 3 tanks believed to belong to Ben, 2 in the outer cavern. one about 200 feet into the cave. But here's where things get truly disturbing. All 3 tanks contained regular air. At the depths Ben was diving, regular air would cause nitrogen narcosis, a potentially fatal condition. Any experienced cave diver would know this. Ben's own dive logs showed he'd made multiple cave dives before. So why would he suddenly use the wrong gas mixture? But that was nothing compared to what happened when diving legend Ed Sorensen arrived from the Bahamas. With over 2,500 dives and countless body recoveries under his belt, Ed Sorensen's latest save was a diver Josh Bratchley who helped save the Thai soccer team of 12 boys and a coach for 15 days back in 2018. Let us know in the comments if you're interested in the incident and would like us to cover the story. Ed was convinced he'd find Ben quickly. He spent 3 days making dangerous dives, covering over 1,700 feet of cave passages 200 feet further than Ben had ever mapped. He found absolutely nothing. No body, no equipment, no signs of fish feeding on decaying flesh, no markings on the cave walls where someone might have scraped through, no disturbed silt where a panicked diver might have thrashed around. It was as if Ben McDaniel had simply vanished. Remember, Ben was 6 feet 1 inch and 210 pounds, both taller and heavier than Ed Sorensen himself. The idea that an untrained recreational diver could have gone deeper into those deadly passages than one of the world's most experienced cave divers seemed impossible. For 36 straight days, 16 expert divers scoured every inch of that cave system. They searched large tunnels and small crevices. They looked in places where panicked divers often get wedged and drown. They used remotely operated vehicles and specialized equipment. They found nothing. When the most thorough cave search in diving history turned up nothing, investigators were forced to consider terrifying alternatives. And each theory was more chilling than the last. One theory was Ben's body was secretly removed. Perhaps he did drown in the cave, but fearing Vortex Spring would be permanently closed, someone pulled his body out before the official search began. The 2 employees who last saw him were questioned extensively, even taking lie detector tests. They passed, but questions remained. Another theory was foul play. Ben's parents hired a private investigator who uncovered disturbing information about the dive shop's staff. Several employees had criminal records. The owner himself was facing serious charges for allegedly taking an employee into the woods and beating him with a baseball bat over money owed. In 2011, that dive shop owner pled no contest to assault and kidnapping charges. A year later, he died in what police called a freak accident, falling down stairs at a cookout, suffering a head injury, and dying a month later in a coma. Police refused to release details, claiming it was part of an ongoing investigation. The connection to Ben's disappearance remains unclear, but the timing is unsettling. Another theory was that Ben faked his own disappearance. After losing his brother, his marriage, his business, and facing crushing debt, perhaps he saw an opportunity to start fresh, disappear into a new life, leaving his old problems behind. But this theory had problems too. In the weeks before his disappearance, Ben seemed happier than he'd been in years. He was making plans with his girlfriend to start a dive-related business. He'd written his parents a letter promising to take care of them in their old age, expressing gratitude for their support. Would someone who'd watched his parents suffer through his brother's death really put them through that agony again? As years passed without answers, Ben's desperate parents made a decision that would have deadly consequences. Frustrated by the lack of progress, they offered a reward, first $10,000, then eventually $30,000 for anyone brave enough to find their son. The cave diving community was horrified. They warned that offering money would attract unqualified divers, turning a tragedy into a death trap. But grief makes people do desperate things. In March 2012, their worst fears came true. a diver entered Vortex Spring cave and never returned. His body was found the next day, far beyond where recreational divers should ever venture, near a shovel and a restriction so tight it was virtually impassable. Ed Sorensen, who recovered this second body, believed the man had been searching for Ben when he panicked, got lost, and drowned. Ben McDaniel's disappearance had claimed another life. The reward was finally withdrawn, but the damage was done. The cave that had already taken over a dozen lives in the 1990s had claimed another victim in its endless hunger for human souls. Years later, diving legend Jill Heineth, you might know her from her incredible iceberg cave diving expeditions, investigated Ben's case for a documentary. Initially skeptical that Ben was in the cave, she changed her mind after exploring the system herself and studying his detailed maps. Heineth now firmly believes Ben McDaniel is somewhere in that cave system, wedged deep in a crevice that's virtually inaccessible, hidden from even the most experienced searchers. She thinks that in a moment of panic, Ben burrowed into a space where no one would ever think to look or be able to reach. But even this expert opinion leaves haunting questions unanswered. 14 years have passed since Ben McDaniel disappeared into the depths of Vortex Spring. 14 years of unanswered questions. 14 years of a family living without closure. Did Ben McDaniel die in those dark tunnels, his body hidden in a crevice too small for recovery? Was he the victim of foul play, his disappearance covered up to protect the dive site? Or did a man broken by tragedy stage his own vanishing, leaving his family to suffer in his wake? The truth is, we may never know, but that's what makes this case so haunting, so absolutely chilling. Somewhere out there, whether in the crushing depths of an underwater cave, buried in a Florida swamp, or living under a new identity, is the answer to one of diving's greatest mysteries. What do you think happened to Ben McDaniel? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you're fascinated by unsolved mysteries like this one, if you found this story gripping, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dive documentaries into the world's most mysterious and dangerous places. And let us know in the comments if you need any story like this to cover. We are happy to do the research and unlocking those stories for you. Until next time, stay curious, but stay safe.